Hello, and welcome to this session of Talking Tech, Women's and Girls in ICT. My name is Tamina Rauf. I'm a student at the University of Oslo, where I study biology with computer programming. And lately, I've been diving into debates on AI and how tech and medicine intertwine. I want to really understand how tech affects our society. So today I'm excited to be having a discussion about tech and tech careers with Laxmi Akkaraju, the Chief Strategy Officer at GSMA. Talking Tech is a series about girls and women in tech being recorded around the world between Girls and ICT Days 2020 and Girls ICT Days 2021. Girls in ICT Day is an international day marked on the fourth Thursday of April each year, and this year it was on the 23rd of April. The objectives of this day is to help create a global environment that empowers and encourages girls and young women to consider studies and careers in growing fields of information and communication technologies. The Talking Tech series is brought to you by the ITU, UNICC, and is in support of Equals, the global partnership of gender equality in the digital age. I am pleased to be a partner on this session today. And the goals of the series are to interest and inspire girls and younger women with information about a range of ICT careers that can be had, bring before a broader audience some of the role women in tech and share information about their career journeys and work, to offer diverse examples of how ICT is being used to support achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and other UN goals, to showcase initiatives that are working with girls to support them in ICT studies and further ICT careers, and lastly, to provide girls and younger women in tech with a leadership opportunity to represent and promote girls in tech organizations with which they are involved and promoted to a broader and international audience. So needless to say, a more gender balanced tech sector is something that I'm passionate about. And on that note, I'm delighted to now shift to a conversation with Laxmi Akkaraju, Chief Strategy Officer at the GSMA. Thanks for coming on today, Laxmi. Firstly, how are you?
Hey, Tamina, I'm doing great. What an exciting background you have in tech and medicine. It really sounds like you're on a great path to choose a career where we're going to see a lot of changes going forward.
I think medtech definitely is interesting, but the more I get involved in technological development, the more curious I get about other industries and types of tech as well, because you work in telecom, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's correct. I work in strategy at the GSMA, which is a global association for mobile operators. And digitization has been happening for a long time, since the 70s, and soon every industry in the world will have some digital aspect. And so what I think is cool about telco, especially mobile connectivity, is that in many ways it's kind of at the epicenter of digitization, because being able to connect with things remotely has really enabled the digitization of many industries. And obviously with the pandemic, we're seeing a hyper digitalization.
So I guess you guys must have a huge imprint, but I didn't quite get, what do you do exactly?
Well, yeah, first of all, Imprint, I mean, definitely. Our board is comprised of CEOs and executives from some of the largest mobile operators in the world. And together they represent around 80% of the world's mobile connections. So it's a very large imprint. Now, as an industry interest association, it's our job to promote the operators' interest in terms of things like developing policies, working with governments, regulators, or assisting with developing standards for the mobile technology. But we also do a lot more than that. We work with the operators, we work with the broader ecosystem on emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, blockchain, the Internet of Things, because these are some of the new technologies that are going to be used to create services that we will be able to enable on our networks, especially when it comes to 5G and we have the 5G rollouts.
I don't know if this is a stupid question, but I still don't get the difference between 5G networks and the 4G networks. I mean, except that 5G is faster, but is there any other differences?
Yeah, it's a great question. Many people just think, right, 5 is bigger than 4, so it must be better. but it's true. 5G is faster. A 5G network can be up to 16 times faster than a 4G network. But in addition to that, it also has a much larger capacity than 4G. You can imagine for use cases like always connected cars or smart cities, or even like the plethora of things that will be enabled by virtual reality, you need both high capacity because there's a lot of data being transferred, and you also need high speed because you're looking for that real-time interaction. And there's also one more aspect of 5G that probably a lot of people haven't talked about, but it's super important. And that is that 5G will be able to handle a lot more connections than 4G. So think that in today's world, we have 5 billion people connected. But tomorrow, we'll have over 30 billion things connected. And they'll be constantly sending information to each other. So you need a network that can handle that kind of complexity. And 5G was designed exactly for that type of complexity.
Okay, so I guess you guys at the GSMA get to dive into a really cool set of new stuff.
Yeah, it's true, we do, and it's really fun. But you know, at the same time, the investments that are going into the 5G infrastructure are huge. We're talking billions and billions of dollars, you know, half a trillion in some regions. Our job with the industry is also working with the larger ecosystem and especially the various industry verticals so that we can enable these use cases for 5G. And it's also really important that we're also able to prove a positive business case for the investment that our industry is making.
What I'm afraid of is that, so this fast-paced technological development, we might end up in a world with less gender equality. So recently I did a podcast where I was talking about how algorithms often have built-in biases. So perhaps the more targeted AI and data companies, but do you think that the telco industry can boost gender equality as well? Like, what kind of responsibility would your members have?
A really great question and a really valid concern, most certainly. First of all, when it comes to the mobile industry itself, we do actually quite a lot to empower women all over the world. Just imagine, for example, if you're living in some rural part of Pakistan or Brazil. With a mobile phone, you have access to all sorts of services that previously were only available through physical institutions in the city somewhere in these countries. But now, all of a sudden, sitting there in the village with your mobile phone, you own your own bank account. And with that, you get financial independence. You can also access digital health services, things like that. So especially in developing countries, owning a phone, a mobile phone is alpha omega. Now, having said that, our research shows that there's still a ways to go. Women globally are still 8% less likely than men to own a phone. But 2 years ago, that number was 10%. So the gap is shrinking, but we still have a way to go. When it comes to mobile internet usage, the development is even more astounding. So 2 years ago, women used 27% less mobile internet than men. And now it's down to 20%. So women are accessing these services using mobile internet. So in short, I think the mobile industry contributes to more gender equality, but unfortunately, these things don't happen overnight.
I get that. And I think it's actually really cool. So I guess mobile combined with increased prosperity can actually break down the gender gaps. But however, I was a bit curious because I'm wondering, so you're talking about the telecom industry as a whole, but I was wondering, what do you guys do to promote women in tech at the GSMA?
We have multiple initiatives. Let me just tell you about one of my favorites. It's called our Tech for Girls program. So here what we do is we provide technical workshops for school children, elementary, middle school, high school, in order to inspire them into careers in science and technology. So the participants from this program usually come from local schools and underserved communities. And they get to learn new skills like coding from industry professionals. And they also get to work with these people in their companies to maybe see some live demos using latest technology. And as you very well know, role models are also super important. So we also invite speakers so they get a chance to listen directly from the horse's mouth from women in these tech careers. It's been launched 2 years ago, and so far the program's already done 20 workshops in 10 countries. So we've done workshops everywhere, really, both in China, in the US, in London, in Lebanon. So it's quite a global program. We're very proud of it.
Wow. Well, I guess you have all the reason to be proud. And I guess it's quite interesting because today it's so evident that tech is a major component on how to change societies, not only to break down gender gaps, but other aspects of our society. And I think especially the focus on girls being represented is a great factor that is being emphasized today. But I'm wondering, how was it to study tech in the 90s, which I suppose you did, in terms especially of the girl-boy ratio of this field?
So long ago. Ironically, back then, engineering studies were often called an MRS degree because rumor had it that if you were a girl going to an engineering degree, then you were guaranteed to find a husband. I don't think people would joke about that today. It's a common misconception that women have always been underrepresented in this field. You know, a decade before even I started studying in 1984, when Apple launched their first computer, almost 40% of US computer programming students were women. But then after that, it went down. And today the figures are around 25% in the US. So actually, things haven't improved with time.
Why is that? Or why would you believe that it hasn't improved?
You know, there's probably many factors. I think one of them may have to do with stereotypes. So in the mid 80s, colleges in the US started to use these personality tests to help find the perfect engineering candidate. But, you know, you talked about algorithms and biases earlier. You know, these algorithms often have these biases. So these tests often rewarded or accepted people in these personality tests that were less social, more into numbers, probably the typical stereotype of a computer geek, you know? But if you're looking for personality traits like empathy or cooperation skills or creativity, or if you're not looking for those traits, then you actually exclude a lot of women who generally have more of these traits, or they come more naturally for women. So I think over time, the tests created an environment where gender stereotypes were actually strengthened. And then on top of that, after the 2000s, you also got a lot of Silicon Valley stereotypes with people like, you know, Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg or Peter Thiel. I think a lot of women at that time were thinking like, all right, I'm not a computer geek, but I'm not this like eccentric boy genius either. So where do I fit in here?
In a way, you could say that you need to like see it before you can picture yourself in a profession.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, and there's been a lot of really big changes lately. I mean, there's been far more prominent women in tech now than 10, 15 years ago. Ginny Romley, the former CEO of IBM, Marissa Mayer from Yahoo, Sheryl Sandberg, everyone knows, Facebook. Susan Wojcicki, who's now the CEO of YouTube, is one of my favorite examples. You know, Sandberg and Wojcicki were actually two of Google's early employees, and Google owes a lot of their success to them, especially to Wojcicki. I don't know if you know, but when Larry Page and Sergey Brin first founded Google, it was Wojcicki who was their first marketing manager, and she came up with a business model for Google Ads, which is their most successful business model, which is where they make all their money. So without her, Google may have just ended up being another search engine that couldn't monetize their data.
Girl power. But do you think that tech is getting broader and that more women from a business background actually can get a transition into the tech industry?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, tech is everything now. As we talked about, digitization is going into everything. All future jobs will have some technical side to them in every sector, and we're not just talking Silicon Valley or innovation centers in China. In the future, we'll see a lot more diversification within the tech workforce, and you see that in studies as well too. I'm sure if you're a business student, you're probably offered a course now on how AI can affect the stock market, or if you're studying medicine, you know, gene technology is obviously going to affect your profession. So no matter what you do, I think, and no matter what you're studying, there'll be a tech angle there, and I think we'll see a lot more blurring of borders in the job market as a result of that.
I just find it very interesting when you're talking about studies and how they are changing with time, because so I'm still studying and I guess I have a few more years left at the university. So I have to ask, do you use a lot of the stuff that you actually learned in school and now while you're in your profession, or is it kind of outdated as technology evolves?
It's a good question. I believe that technology builds on technology. So even though it's been a while since I worked as an engineer, with the tech background, I feel like I still can have conversations with students who just graduated last year. That's one aspect of it, having kind of a foundation of that. I definitely use the life lessons that I got from college to this day. So in my view, the university is not just about teaching you specific content, but it's also about teaching you a set of personal skills that you carry with you for the rest of your life. And most new things you learn, you just add on top as you move along through life, right?
I do agree, but I find it a bit intimidating because I feel like I have to stay up to date on everything I do. But is it actually true that there are so many big developments in tech, but do you have to kind of stay up to date?
I think it's really good to stay up to date. To be honest, I haven't worked as a technician in many years, but with a technical background, it's easier to stay up to date. But I also feel that, a lot of these things, because a lot of technology is really permeating through society so much that a lot of this has become written in a way that's also very available for people who don't have a tech background. So staying up to date is super important, because you need to understand how technology is going to affect your life, because it does affect everyone's life. For the last two decades, I've worked mostly with management, and even in management, you have to develop. For example, being a leader now in the situation where it's the 4th month of home office. I mean, I'm going nuts, but we have to figure out, how we're able to meet our stakeholders, our customers, lead a team, and do all of these things remotely. So development and keeping up to date in all fields is super relevant.
Okay, so now I want to lurk a bit into your personal life, you could say. So before you became the CSO of the GSMA, what did you exactly do? Like, what was the road until here?
So I've almost always worked in technology. My last role, I worked in Norway as a manager in Evry, which is one of the largest IT service providers in the Nordics. So they provide IT services to banks, the public sectors, hospitals, you name it. I've also been a country manager in Evry, India for some time. So myself and my family lived in Bangalore before we moved back to Norway with Evry. And before that, I worked at a tech startup in the US working in network security. So I've kind of been all over the world with these various jobs. It's been a lot of fun.
That's actually quite cool, because I'm born and raised in Norway, but my parents are from Sri Lanka. And I know that there is a huge difference between the societies, but I'm wondering, how was the difference in like the working society? How was the difference between working in the US and in Norway and in India and all around the world, as you mentioned?
As you know, so tech doesn't change in the different parts of the world. So in one way, you've got a kind of a core of content that you have an international language on, but you're absolutely right. Cultural differences are huge, and work culture is very different in India versus Norway versus the US. Work-life balance is really different. And the way people prioritize that. And I think I learned a lot about being a leader by working in these different countries, because leadership is so close to kind of the human cultural side of the workplace, and you really have to be able to adapt to the environment and the employees that you have.
Yeah, I guess that's actually quite evident and true. And I have to admit to to a little secret. So I was stalking you on LinkedIn the other week, and I just wanted to ask, so for me, you're like this clear role model, but I'm wondering, who were your role models, and where did you like receive your inspiration growing up and today, of course?
That's a good question. I think growing up, I kind of like was thrown into a fiery pit, because I had two brothers, one older one and one younger one. So I was stuck in the middle, and they were super competitive. So I think I was kind of pushed to be competitive to keep up with these guys. And then, of course, both my parents worked in STEM. So my father was an engineer, and my mother was a mathematics professor at the university. So obviously, that I was very lucky to always kind of have that foundation as a background, and that was always very encouraging. When it comes to role models, I think that's a bit harder. I mean, I have so many people that I admire in so many different ways. One person who I love is Michelle Obama. I devoured her book, Becoming, and I just thought parts of it were really fun, really inspirational. I love the point that she says that she's a list person, because she makes lists all the time and crosses things off. And for me, that's really recognizable. That's something that I do a lot, having worked in management and projects and people management, things like that. Another one of my big heroes is Yuval Noah Harari. He wrote Sapiens and Homo Deus. I think many people know who he is. And what I like about him is just his amazing ability to take a complex topic and make it very understandable and relatable. And I follow him a lot, not only his books, but I follow all of his articles and all the lectures that he does as well. He's published some really great stuff about the COVID-19 crisis and the future recently. Who inspires you?
It's like a specter of people, because on one side, I get really inspired by like great leaders, such as you mentioned Michelle Obama, but even like her husband, Barack. The way he speaks and the way he is able to engage others, I think is also quite underestimated when working with tech, because it seems so overwhelming. So the ability to actually explain something so complex, just as you mentioned that Harari does in Sapiens, to have that ability is quite inspiring. But also you have, perhaps it's a bit basic, but it's underestimated again, which is Marie Curie. And the way throughout her life, with so many pitfalls, she was able to pursue knowledge and even like aspire to do even better than her peers, which were all men, is quite inspiring today, because I believe, especially my generation, we take it a bit for granted that women have this certain place and space to evolve in our societies. So I actually find that quite inspiring, but it's also important to see that, especially in the tech industry, which is so large that you cannot even grasp it, there are so many inspirational sources and role models out there that are not necessarily known names, but are super inspiring because they have this potential in themselves. So I like to believe that actually like everyone is a role model in their own way, but it just depends on what you feel like you want to be inspired by.
What, is there anything specifically that that made you get into tech?
I think it was when I realized that tech and science in general is like, it's so up and coming, and it is indeed the future. And also I think that tech is a part of something that is changing our society today, both the socio-political but also our economical societies and situations. So if you want to change and mold society, you have to kind of be a part of the system. So I think that was one thing that I realized when I was growing up, and I thought like, okay, if I want to change the world, I have to kind of get into tech, because unless you're not going to be able to.
I love that. That's super ambitious. I really like that you want to put your footprints out there. Any next steps or ideas on for your future plans?
So I just finished my bachelor in science. So I'm going to pursue a postgraduate program, which is completely different, but it's more about the aspect which I just mentioned earlier, about how to kind of speak and write and in a way formulate and explain difficult, complex things in an easy manner. So I'm going to do that for a year, and then I'm going to pursue with my master's in the same field as I'm doing. So molecular biology, AI, medical research, and how to use computer programming and technology in these quite traditional science fields, to see how we can modernize them in a proper way to match like the evolving society we're heading towards.
That's really great. That'll give you a very broad set of skills. Is there any particular kind of side of tech or use case for these things that would interest you the most?
I think I mentioned it a bit earlier, but perhaps artificial intelligence in medicine, and as I said, how they intertwine and how we can be able to kind of modernize this old traditional ways of research and of finding new things, or the methods. But I also want to see like how tech can work as a tool to, you know, direct the whole field of equality in our societies, and that so we can see that in one way tech can discriminate by perhaps the biases which are built in algorithms, but to see how if we use it properly, that it may also kind of further induce like greater equality, which is needed, because as you said, that we have come really far. And when you mentioned the work at the GSMA and all the stuff, the cool stuff you're doing, like we've come super far, but we still have quite a long way to go. So I think that will be like the most interesting part. And it's also nice to see that tech is, in a way, it's not only science and like science geek and programming nerds, but it is like there's drops of tech everywhere now. So we need like people who are good at it, both like on the machine, but also otherwise around. But you know what, Laxmi, I'm actually looking at the clock right now, and I think we're out of time. But it was really lovely to meet you and to speak to you, and definitely inspiring and kind of motivating as well. So that is a wrap on our session today of Talking Tech, Women and Girls in ICT. And again, Laxmi, thank you so much for coming here and sharing both your personal life, but also your work. And I really, really enjoyed our chat today. And thank you so much to all the viewers for watching.
Thank you so much.